When is it time to quit your job? How unhappy do you need to be to just throw in the towel and hand in your notice? You might even be making a ton of money, but you just don't feel it's worth it. So when do you leave? I'm Mike. I've got a background in business from pharma tech and consulting. I've held C-level roles in global organizations. I have degrees in business, HR, and psychology. I'm here to help you navigate the corporate world. And today, it's about when it's time to quit your job and move on. And also, when it isn't. Let's get stuck in. First up, money. Okay, some of you are super open to risk, others aren't. I'm a little bit risk averse. Some of you are super optimistic and believe that things are going to work out. Others have a more pessimistic take on their opportunities. So, as a general rule, I'm not quitting if I can't pay my bills. And honestly, unless your job is seriously affecting your health, you shouldn't either. The mental health impact of long-term unemployment is no joke. So gritting your teeth and keeping your head down at a job you hate is sometimes a better option. Imagine that you have another job offer that pays more. Here, I'm saying maybe to quitting. Why? Because of two things. It takes time to build a trajectory in a company. If you've been at a company for some years and you're on a good track and you've got strong relationships with other people, then you lose that. It's going to take you time to rebuild that trajectory at the new company, and it might over time set you back. Generally, the younger you are, the more you can job hop. Being 32 years old and having a lot of companies on your resume isn't a bad thing. Stats from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics show that somewhere between 60 and 80% of people's lifetime employers are in the years before they turn 40. Once you're over the age of 40, a lot of job switches tend to be interpreted as unreliability and a sign of problems. They often come across as more red flags. Having said that, I'd say it's still best to stick around for 2 years or more. 1 year per company is a very short tenure and not typically seen as a good sign. So, you quit if you don't have a decent trajectory and you've been there for long enough for the employment to not seem weird. And of course, if you're younger.
What they learned is that this person, the high performer of low trust, is a toxic leader and a toxic team member. And they would rather have a medium performer of high trust, sometimes even a low performer of high trust, it's a relative scale, over this person.
What about quitting when you hate the people you work with? Honestly, suck it up. There's always going to be someone you hate. Unless it's a key person who you work with every single day, I'd say stick around. You don't know who you'll meet at the new company. There's also going to be annoying people there. Jobs aren't perfect, and learning to deal with annoying colleagues is just part of work and corporate life.
I forgot. Yeah. You see, we're putting the cover sheets on all TPS reports now before they go out. Did you see the memo about this?
The toxic boss, on the other hand, is a completely different story. It depends a lot on how you define toxic, of course, but I'd say there are 3 things that are worth reflecting on. Overt toxic leadership traits: gaslighting, narcissism, harassment. Signs of a boss that is willing to throw you under the bus at a moment's notice is not worth sticking around for. Also, because this is not the kind of boss that helps you build that trajectory for your own career advancement. Differences in styles. Micromanagers aren't inherently bad. There are people that are very happy being micromanaged. They like the comfort of knowing exactly what is expected, and they work in such a detailed manner that the micromanager is almost comforting. But if you're constantly clashing over details, or your manager is so nitty-gritty that it's affecting your confidence, then you're going to have a tough time. Your manager usually has the right to define how he or she wants the job done. If that definition is forcing you into a way of working that is counter to what you enjoy, it's time to move on. You've made it this far, so you clearly haven't quit the channel just yet. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It helps out the channel massively, and you'll be updated on the videos that I put out. Thanks.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but they're never going to promote you.
You didn't get the promotion you were hoping for. That doesn't have to be a reason for moving on. I've seen this a lot with younger staff, regardless of whatever generation they are. When you're young, you're inherently a little bit more impatient. You want that promotion, and you're comparing yourself to some other person that was hired more or less at the same time as you.
You have been passed over for promotions, even though you were doing all of the right things.
But the fact is, a half year or a year here or there isn't really a big deal in the grander scheme of things. For example, if you're in consulting and looking for that engagement manager promotion that typically happens after, let's just say, 2 to 5 years at level, I wouldn't be worrying about it not happening in year 2 or in year 3 potentially. But year 4, then the company might not see you as a high performer, or you're stuck in a business area that isn't performing. That's when you might want to start thinking more actively about moving on. And if it's year 7, then you've plateaued in this company. Accept that you've plateaued or move on. So I live in Denmark. In Denmark, there's no limit on how long you can be sick. There isn't a limit on sick days. So in theory, a person can be sick for 4 months without risking getting fired.
Burnout, not just a figure of speech anymore. It's actually been declared a legitimate medical diagnosis by the World Health Organization.
It is officially defined as a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed.
That's not the case in the US and a whole lot of other countries. So if you're getting mentally affected so much in a US-based company that you're going to be sick for 3 months, chances are you're going to get fired. That means your timeline on when to move on is just going to be much shorter. But for those Danes and some other European companies, you often stay far too long at the company on sick leave. The fact is, when you come back, your job has most likely not changed. Your boss has most likely not changed. The company has most likely not changed. So you're just going back to what made you sick. If you were working at Morgan Stanley or Amazon and you burned out, you're going to burn out again. Move on when it's seriously affecting your health. And by seriously, I mean seriously. Work is stressful sometimes. Work is not always fun. If it was, people wouldn't insist on being paid. Some level of mental and physical robustness is necessary to get through the day. But when it's getting serious, don't make the assumption that things are going to change. Move on.
Intel could be headed for a big shake-up.
Devastating blow to our local economy, but especially out in Washington County. Almost 3,000 layoff notices arriving in mailbox at Intel in Hillsborough.
Welcome back. Shares in Novo Nordisk up as much as 4% pre-market, but since paring those gains after the company announced it will cut 9,000 jobs or more than 11% of its workforce.
The company is in a downward spiral. It's owned by private equity or something and they're firing people. You're at Intel and you've seen how they're laying off 20,000 people. That doesn't by definition mean you should move on. But I do say this, if you're going to move on, be a first mover, especially if your skills are in demand somewhere else. The thing that happens with these cutbacks is it creates more supply in the job market. With 20,000 people out at Intel, there's going to be an oversupply of some key skills in the area. That's going to make it harder to find a new job. So getting out early is sometimes beneficial. Take the deal if there is one. If you're not a first mover, then it's a question of digging in while looking for something else. But generally, if you have in-demand skills in an industry, getting out early is typically the better option. Whenever two companies merge, it's usually the case that two things happen. First, there's a bit of a cleanup in redundant departments, so cost saving by merging two or more teams that do the same thing. And then there's some plan to re-strategize and set a new direction, which often leads to some degree of cost cutting. Second, senior key people leave because they don't like the new direction of the company. Honestly, I'd say stick around. Culture is nonsense. If you like your boss and you're doing things that are interesting, leaving because the vibe feels different is just silly. I remember being at a big consulting firm once, and we had a healthy competition with some other consulting firms. And you'd hear how a lot of people would talk about how over there at that consulting firm, they can't do what we do because their culture is something so something. But you know what also happened? Those same people would switch and they'd say, well, I switched because they allow this thing and their culture is something, which makes it great. It's the same people. They just changed the narrative. And why? To justify their move. Sure, if you get bought by a Japanese corporation, things are going to get a little bit more bureaucratic, but the day-to-day is not where you're going to feel it. And unless the buyer is doing a complete house cleaning, there might be new doors and new opportunities that appear. It's not a reason in itself to leave. This applies to other major changes in a company as well. Just because the board has launched a new strategy or announced a big change, it's not really a reason to jump ship. Even a new manager doesn't necessarily warrant an automatic move to a new company. Things change and jumping ship every time they do is just not worth it. But pay attention, feel things out and see what it actually means and then make up your mind from there. A leopard doesn't change its spots. At Amazon, people have worked hard. The company is very open about this.
I get this question about work-life balance all the time from both ends of the spectrum. And my view is I don't even like the phrase work-life balance. I think it's misleading.
Consulting firms are work hard, play hard environments. If you have a job that requires travel, that's not going to change anytime soon. If you're at Microsoft, you're online at weird times because it's a global organization. Every morning you're going to wake up and things have changed because somebody in another time zone decided something that impacts your day. When those things no longer work for you, you need to move on when you have the opportunity to do so because it's not changing. Lack of recognition. Promotion and salary increases are forms of recognition. If they don't happen, then there's a path to take that makes sense. But if your boss is just not telling you you did a good job, honestly, feedback is overrated. A boss berating you or belittling you or undermining you is one thing, but not being told you're amazing and a unique flower that makes wonderful contributions, honestly, Suck it up. You need to have more confidence in yourself and not be dependent on external validation. As long as you're progressing and you feel you're being more formally recognized, those micro things in the day-to-day are nice, but honestly shouldn't be a reason to leave. I know it sounds harsh and old school, but it's just not a big enough thing. I'm simply not going to care about not being selected as Employee of the Month if the only thing Employee of the Month means is that I get my face on the wall for a month. Just don't thank me, pay me. Bad pay. All companies find a level that is their normal level of pay. McKinsey has a level and they stick to those levels. Accenture has a different level and they stick to it. Accenture is never going to pay like McKinsey. Walmart is never going to pay like Morgan Stanley. And also, all companies have a budget that they follow every single year. It's set by finance. They say, we're going to spend 4% more on salary costs this year. That's going to be the average salary increase. If you don't feel you're being paid enough, you usually have two options. You can push for a promotion because that will lead to a pay jump, or you can move on to a company that's willing to pay more. I have 25 years of experience. The biggest company I was at had over 200,000 employees. The smallest had 6,000 employees. The number of people that succeed in convincing their boss to give them what we call an off-cycle increase is minute. It's less than a percentage of the overall employee headcount. Now, Lloyd from Dumb and Dumber, he would be saying, so you're saying there's a chance. But honestly, don't count on it. If you're low, you're going to stay low in salary. What about leaving when your skills aren't being utilized? This is a controversial one because it depends. People are very quick to babble on about how they're not learning and developing. And often they conflate promotion with development. Ask yourself, are you truly not developing, or are you really just unhappy about salary or title? If you can see that your skills are objectively underutilized and your capabilities are falling behind what is expected in the market, then move on. Today, everything is about constantly developing your skills. So you're at a disadvantage if you're stagnating. But remember, development is more than just coding and G-sheets. Relationship management, steering, stakeholder management, all that sort of soft skill stuff is also development. But yes, stagnation equals move on. And then the last piece of advice. This advice is based on data that shows that the younger you are, the more impatient you are. Part of this is a generational thing. Part of it is about the prefrontal cortex. And part of it is the nature of the modern job market. The converse is true the older you get. And this has an implication. Older people tend to stick around for too long. Younger people tend to jump ship too quickly. If you're young, you're going to conclude your boss is toxic way before the older person deems that manager as toxic. Conversely, some old fart like me will ignore the signs that my boss is toxic and put up with it for far too long. And the moral of the story is, assess the reality of the things as objectively as you can. Don't be a slave to your initial emotion to either tough it out or jump ship at the smallest sign. Think it through. Analyze your options. And remember, the grass isn't by definition greener on the other side. That's all I had for this time around. Share your thoughts in the comments, leave a like, and remember to subscribe. See you soon.